Hello, 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 and welcome once again to the You Only Go Once podcast. I am joined by my effervescent, lovely co-host, Eileen Grimes, and we're here with a fantastic guest. Eileen, kick us off.
Thanks, Cheryl. So we are here today with James Bryant. James is a husband, father, son, relative, friend, and splendiferously fantabulous all-around guy. Now, I can say this for a fact because I know him, and all those words are very, very true. So, James, welcome to Yogo.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So we brought you here. When Cheryl and I were making a list of people we really wanted to bring on, your name was definitely one at the top.
Yes.
I just feel like any conversation we've ever had has been like, wow, I want to hear more. Please tell me more about all of the things that you've done in life and where you're going. And you just seem to really embody that spirit of living this one life really on purpose, and everything you do, like, people can just see how much you're enjoying what you do all the time. So how did you get like that?
There we go. Now it's black and white.
There you go.
Awesome.
We're dealing with some technical issues for our listeners. It's very fine. It's working. Computers, you know.
There we go. That's better than my head floating over water.
You're right.
Oh my goodness.
How did I get this way?
Yeah.
A lot of people that set me up to be this way. Mother, father, grandparents on either side, a lot of teachers, friends, a couple of bosses I think I met throughout my lifetime, but probably mostly family, great grandparents also. Yeah. And currently probably my kids, because they've turned me into somebody that I was not 20 years ago. 15 years ago. Oldest is 17, so I've changed a lot since then. I've learned patience.
That's a tough one.
Yeah. I think teenagers tend to do that, right? They'll teach you a level of patience you didn't realize you had. So that's great.
I have boys, and they don't talk. They don't, when they get to a certain, they're not going to tell you anything. How was your day? Good. Nothing. Everything is a one-word answer.
Do they text anything?
Not to, when I
obviously to others.
Yeah, but to me, other than I'll text and say I'm outside of the school. Okay. And that's okay. They're not giving up anything right now. No information. Absolutely nothing.
How do you elicit information from people that are being monosyllabic?
Well, from kids, it just doesn't.
Okay.
It doesn't. So that's what probably tears my wife up, because I think before the teenage years, they shared everything with her. Once the 13, 14 kicked in, it was pretty much like they were pretty, they were like secret agents. They don't want to tell her anything, and they never talk too much openly about anything with me. And I think that's sort of a standard kind of thing. A lot of times with a lot of boys and dads versus boys with moms, you're a little more open about your, the emotional stuff or things that are on your mind. Well, from my perspective and some of my friends, with boys and dads, it's more general sports, that kind of thing, but not like how I'm feeling, what's going on, that kind of stuff. And I sort of like thought about it from the perspective of my own mother and my parents, and I was like, yeah, now I understand, because initially I was trying to pull. It was like pulling teeth. Come on, tell me something. And I thought about it, I'm like, yeah, I did the same thing.
I mean, that's some of the natural course of maturing, right? There is the pulling away to create independence, because I'm no longer part of you, right? Like that's where that grows. And it's so hard. I still have young ones, but I'm already seeing, more and more of that. It's like from the baby years, you're like, you need me for everything. And then you get used to that. And then they start pulling away a little bit more, and it just
Mhm.
hurts a little bit.
Just a little bit.
It does, but it just sort of keeps going. And I don't know, at one point you're used to it, and then it's very difficult to see that. And yet totally the natural course of things.
Yeah, I will. I told my wife I will probably be the big ball of snot when it's time to let them go at campus or wherever they happen to go. I
Yeah.
know I will be the one. Oh, well, she probably will as well, but she'll have to console me, and I'll be passing out and whatever, fanning me and everything. That'll be me.
What kind of example do you hope that you're leaving for your sons?
The example of, well, one of availability.
Mm.
I try to make sure I'm available to them all of the time.
Mm-hmm.
I actually, with career choice, I made sure that with them, and that was, my own past experience, didn't have the availability from male figures a lot. So for me, I wanted to make sure that was the case. So when I looking for different jobs, I wanted to make sure that I didn't have a whole lot of travel, because there were a couple positions that I looked at a while back, and they required a lot of travel. I was like, no, I need to make sure I'm there all day,
Yeah.
every day, if at all possible.
Yeah.
That example, and I try not to be too preachy to them. Between my sons and my nephew, I'm texting them all the time, different quotes, different things, all kinds of different things about life. Because one of the things I push on them is for their future. Two rules. One is what is your passion?
Mm.
And I have them write down what their passions are, and that's one. And two is find a need and fill it.
Oh, yeah.
For me, it was my career started off in engineering, electrical engineering. Didn't like it. Didn't like it. And the test I took in high school pointed out, okay, you're good in math, you're good in science. And it listed a bunch of careers. My mother saw it. She's like, it said engineer. She said, she saw the salary. She said,
yeah,
so I did.
sure.
And I got in and I was like, yeah. So for them, it's like, figure out what is your passion. Because if it's something you're passionate about, and it also fits a need that society wants or more so needs, you'll never work a day in your life. You'll be happy doing something that you enjoy doing, and you won't live at home with mom and dad. So that's sort of what I want to try to. I've been working on leaving with them. I'm gonna try not to be too preachy about everything. I'm always talking to them about repeating things or things that have happened to me, or like when they talk about different situations or whatever, I compare it to my life, compare it to their mother's life, their grandparents' lives, or whatever, all of the time.
Yeah, I don't know, parenting's a crazy game that no one's prepared for, really. So just the fact that you're even sharing that with them is so big. Like, to have that at a young age, I don't know that I even heard the word passion or like understood what that meant until much later in my life. So for them to even have consideration of that now, I mean, that's a gift.
Yeah. You've obviously given a lot of advice to a younger generation. If you had to go back to your younger self, what advice would you give your younger self?
Follow your passion.
Yeah.
So, because if I'd follow my passion, I probably would have been either a teacher or a meteorologist.
Oh my goodness.
What?
Go on, Cheryl.
So I mean, yeah. So listen, audience.
Yeah, please tell them.
James is like a meteorologist prodigy on LinkedIn.
Yep.
Like, if I need to know about any sort of like disasters, whether it's like local or global, he is all over it. And he gives such a great perspective on the impact, what it means from a climate perspective, from a people perspective, from a like a property perspective, from a disaster recovery perspective, like all of those things. Like, you can tell, like on LinkedIn, whenever you post those things, I am like honed in. I'm like, all right, what happened in the world today? And you'll talk about things like, oh, there was a flood here, or there was a typhoon here, and this is what happened, and what does this mean for the future? Like, Oh, somebody needs to get you a meteorology gig, because I think you're so you can clearly tell it fascinates you. And it also, when you share the information, it certainly fascinates others. I know it's like, like of the many things that I like, of the many things I scroll past, yours is not one of them, because I want to see what's going on in your world. And I know from experience how good you can be as somebody that educates people, because so full disclosure, folks, we work with James, and James is part of the disaster recovery and business continuity unit. And he's taught us so much about how all of those things work. And he does it in a way that it doesn't sound like techno babble. And that is something that's always really appreciated. And that's kind of the way I feel that you present the weather events on LinkedIn. So folks, if you
I try to cut to the chase. I got to be that way from, well, when stuff I post on LinkedIn, primarily because of past company I worked for. When I did, I guess would have been called disaster response, and it was in the telco, and I was still doing more of engineering, more so. And that was like for a sprint. And at the time, the focus was cell sites, actual buildings, switch facilities, that sort of thing. And we had an outside vendor. I cannot remember his name, and I probably don't want to say it anyway. But he would send weather information, and it would be like, it would just be like he's throwing up all over the place. It was TMI. It was too much information.
Yeah.
And for me, it was always cause effect. All right, what exactly is this? Just cut to the chase. Give me the executive summary, Reader's Digest version of this. So it was always, all right, this is a severe, what is one of those things, derecho. So it's a storm. As most people hear about it, it's severe straight line winds, but they call it a derecho, winds moving down and to the right. So it's what is happening, it's that, and what is the impact on our network? And then even more importantly, the customers. So if we have this happening, the effect is, well, one, it'll knock out power, and then two, it'll knock out power to the sites in this particular area. So we need to stage people here. So it was about being prepared and getting people in front of it. Another example is I still remember like this stuff at California. In California, mudslides. There's certain time of the year, near the end of the year, they'd have mudslides and impact equipment. So it was always cut to the chase. And he'd send emails, and they would go to like 300 people, and he would write all kinds of stuff. And you could tell he loved it. He loved it. Oh, and the weather, and this is happening, and he give all of these math equations, and I'm like, you have to know your audience. So the teacher part is knowing your audience, knowing who you're speaking to. And if you're speaking to a bunch of other geeks, sure, probably. But the average person, like, just give me what I need to know. That's all I want to know. How is this going to affect me? Or how is, if you're like, if I'm posting something, it's like, well, how is this affecting other people that I might be concerned about?
Have you thought about creating a YouTube channel?
No, that I have not.
You should.
You should. Yes. Agreed. Yes.
Just saying. You can do whatever you want, but just saying, you should do that.
I might look into that.
I mean, it would be kind of cool, right?
It would be great.
One, you get to educate. Two, you get to do the media. You get to do both of the passions, right? And then share it on LinkedIn, and then you can start monetizing on YouTube and all of those things. Anyway, I'm the worst person to talk to about this kind of stuff because I get very excited and want to tell you all the ideas. Look into it.
I'll do that. Those are the things the two things that I thought that if I wasn't doing what I'm doing, I would probably want to do either one of those.
I love it.
Interested me a lot. The first job out of school I was working for the National Science Foundation. And I was hooked. And working with young kids, middle school, high school, that sort of thing. And watching their eyes light up, that really got me. Because it was making making the difficult simple.
Mm.
Was it something I always disliked? High school and college was chemistry. Never liked chemistry. Didn't care for it. But I had to go into this one school, and the kids at the school, it was in Philly, and they were just not paying attention or whatever. And I was like, okay, I try to figure out something that would be of interest. And I brought up potholes, and they were laughing or whatever. And the teacher was like, oh, he's not going to get through. And then I began talking. I said, well, how are potholes formed? They were like, I don't know. I said, well, cause and effect. You're in chemistry. What is asphalt made of? Carbon. And I go up to the board. Ions, proton, all of that sort of talking about how many do they have, negative, positive charges. Okay, in the winter time, what falls? Snow. What is that made of? Water, H2O. Mr. Bryant, we know where you're going with this. And I put that up. And then when you want to melt the snow, what happens? Sodium. Put up the sodium. Take this one away, put that one back. And all of a sudden they were like, oh my God, that made sense. So it was, that was something I would, that from a teaching perspective, I enjoyed that because it was making the complex simple, and it was like applying, it doesn't matter what it is you go to school for.
Yeah.
You want to see how it actually applies to real life. So that everything is not theory, like when whatever you're studying. Journalism, it's like you're just reading these books all the time. Oh my God, am I ever going to use any of this stuff?
For sure.
That's awesome.
What age was it? Did you say middle school or high school?
They were high school.
Okay.
They were high school.
Got it. I also taught, while I was teaching high school math. I loved working with teenagers. I mean, not everyone can say that, but there is something that can be fun, and throwing in just being goofy and whatever. I mean, I did that. So I was teaching geometry, and we were talking about reasoning, right? So inductive, deductive reasoning. And I did the Macarena for them. I'm like, well, how do I know it comes next? Right. And so I was like, oh, terrible, but they remembered it. So, yeah,
it made an impression.
Exactly. Right. You're not going to forget those kinds of things. Yeah, I mean, you should be a teacher. Sorry. you really.
I told myself somewhere when I get closer to retirement, this was before having kids. I said, when I get closer to retirement, I plan on going back to do it.
Yeah.
And hopefully it doesn't drain me where I'm like, oh my God, I feel like I'm 900 years old when I'm looking at kids. Well, that was one of the reasons why I thought I didn't want to do it early on, because I actually thought ahead, and I was like, I don't want to have kids in my class that are kids. 20 years later, they come to me, Mr. Bryant, and they have gray hair too. And it's like, oh my God, how long have I been this?
Yeah.
That was one of the, I mean, it didn't really stop me, but I had that sort of negative thought in my head. I was like, I don't want to see that. I don't want to do
that. Can't accept that. I'm sorry. It's not happening.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
I had a teacher tell me in college that people had come to ask, he had been there for so many years, and he's very loved and respected. And a lot of people have asked him what's changed over the time frame that he's been there. He's like, me. Everybody looks the same that comes in. Like, they come in, they're young, they're bright-eyed, they're bushy-tailed. He's like, I'm the one that's getting older. So it's interesting to see that perspective of seeing like fresh eyes on things, making an impression, but also realizing that you are moving from like education to legacy. And it's kind of a fascinating twist on things. Because you're like, oh, well, I better get on it. So, yeah, it's a lot. But I hope you do. I really do hope you go back and consider teaching, because I think you'd be wonderful at it.
Thank you. I hope I am. I hope that I can make that happen. And then number two, that I'm good at it.
I have no doubt. I really doubt.
Right. Exactly.
So Cheryl was talking about legacy. It brings up something you've been working on.
He's laughing.
So I'm just curious, right? There's sort of a piece of legacy that you're working on, and I don't know if you wanted to share anything about that or not, but I just when we've talked, I think it's really fascinating and just so interesting in what you're bringing into the world.
The legacy
Your
meaning that the
book,
book that I'm trying,
Yes.
my memoir,
that's the one.
Yes,
which
that's the one.
I and I need to push myself to complete it,
Mhm.
but at the same time, by taking so long, I find myself putting more and more into it, more things, because the driver for doing it in the first place were my kids and my nephew, so that they could see, what sort of like what we're doing here today, what makes me tick, what makes dad or Uncle James who he is, and how did he come to be, and that ties back to the legacy of my parents, parents, and going all the way back, as I think I've mentioned to you guys.
Yeah.
Going all the way back on one side of my family to 1810, the other side to about 1837.
It's amazing. Wow.
And just seeing how all of that, just life was different. And so some of the things that I've placed in there that weren't in there before, I was pretty much trying to point out to my kids in writing this, and my nephew, that all right, so here were your fifth great grandparents, and telling things about them that I saw in black and white, because I'd never talked to them or anything. But then also paralleling some of the things that were happening in the country and in the world, so that they can get context of, okay, they were doing this while this was happening. And in each successive generation, I tried to do the same thing. That, the Great Migration, when a lot of Black folks left the Carolinas from one side South Carolina, the other side North Carolina, migrating north, the types of things that were happening, so that they could, so that like when they're studying right now in school and they're talking about these things, they can be like, wow, okay, this is where my third great grandparents were during this time. Such as like my mother's father, my grandfather, he was World War II, on a minesweeper. And and I found the picture of the minesweeper when it was commissioned. And my mother, I think, well, I told you guys, you guys know my mother passed a few years ago, but I wish I'd been able to show her that picture. I was able to show my aunt the picture.
Yeah.
It was a picture of their father, my grandfather, on the back of this minesweeper. And I found that, and I was able to put that as one of the pictures into the book. He's all the way in the back. I found the picture, I kept zooming in, showed my aunt. She was like, oh my God, I think that's him. Kid. So I was, things like that.
What have been some of your takeaways from learning those stories and putting those together? Like, what have you learned about yourself through doing that?
I've learned some habits that I have, that other relatives have had them. I've learned, well, one of the key things was taking my time with life, and more so specifically love, because one of the things that I saw, because like generally speaking, and like generations prior, people got married much earlier.
Right. Sure.
And I noticed that was a pattern that was happening. And growing up, I remember my mother and my mother's mother always telling me, slow down. And they would meet when I would bring girls to meet them. And I was, I just thought it was like, the mom and grandma thing. No, she's not good enough. Kind of. I think one part of it may have been that.
So yeah.
But I think, mothers are going to do that for sons, and grandmothers as well. But I think a lot of it had to do with them paralleling themselves and knowing that they both fell, as my grandmother used to joke about my mother. She would say, oh, your mother was in love with your father. She'd always say she was in love, because she was 10th grade or whatever, and they got married like right after high school or whatever. She's like, she should have slowed down. So for me, my grandmother would say that all the time. Nope, don't. I had a couple girlfriends. One in college. She met her, and she gave us what I was calling a fake smile.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Grandparents do that. And you know what that means. It's like, hi, nice to meet you. It's like something's behind that. And the next time I saw her, she was, I said, so what did you think? She's like, dump her.
Oh my God.
Said, no, that girl wants to get married. And I was like, how do you know?
No. They just know. They just tell. It's so awesome.
Not long after that, a couple weeks later, that girlfriend was like, where's this leading? We were still in college. And I was like, wow, how did she read that from just, and I was like, okay. So those are some of the things I've learned from doing this, from, paying attention to that type of stuff.
Were there any surprises that you discovered along the way in your family research?
Oh yeah, there were. I mean, because like in most families, there are a lot of secrets.
Oh yeah,
there's thousands of secrets, and most times you just never find out about this stuff. One of them on my father's side, my great uncle, or would be my great great uncle, my great grandfather's older brother. He was a bishop because they were still very heavily into church, and he had a family, wife, kids, and he fell in love with the pastor's wife and ran away with the pastor's wife from down there and came north to Philadelphia. So the interesting part is he came up here and with that pastor's wife and his nephew, my grandfather, come to see him. And he met my grandmother. So if it had not been for my my bishop great uncle, great great uncle, who was pretty much, making eyes at the pastor's wife and running away with her, I may not be.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's one of those interesting things that you find. You're like, wow, my grandfather's younger sister, she told me that. She said, none of your cousins or anyone else that's still around even cares, or they don't ask questions, because I was always asking questions. So that was one of the secrets I got.
That's fascinating. The family secrets are always, I mean, it's amazing what gets coded as something else, or, well, and especially, looking back at history, it's not like everyone talked about mental health issues the same way that we currently do, right? Or even handled them societally in any kind of the same way, right? Like, well, they went to the home and that's where they stayed. But there's so many interesting things that come up along those lines, and then they cause different shifts in the family dynamic, which then start to get passed down. It's so fascinating to me, and I'm really glad that you, or not glad, but it's interesting seeing other people get fascinated by that kind of stuff. So
yeah, well, because with families you have all kinds of different history going on, but for me it's always interesting when you could find someone who tells some of those things, because I don't now, from that, my grandmothers and older generations prior to that, a lot of them are not here anymore. Because I have one aunt, great aunt, my grandmother's younger sister, 92 now. She's 92. That was her younger sister, and she's told me a few things which I was like, wow, okay, didn't know that. Well, your grandmother met your grandfather when she was working at a juke joint, and he was he was getting off of that about to go to World War II.
Wow.
Stuff like that. And I was like, oh, okay.
Wow.
Stuff that, it kind of, if she didn't tell me, it would kind of disappear.
Yeah.
And it's interesting too, because it's not like, well, I didn't want to know any of that kind of stuff about my parents or grandparents or anything. Like, just thinking from your son's perspective right now, I'd have been like, I don't care, but I care now,
Right.
And my dad has done so much genealogy stuff, and he has just files and files of all kinds of things that I'm so grateful to have now and be able to look at that stuff and understand it. I didn't understand why that would be interesting. I didn't really like history either in school, so that probably played a part in some of it. I did math, but now, like, the stories behind it for me are the most interesting piece of it, right? Like, just to hear dates and a name doesn't mean so much, but when you start hearing those stories, and especially if you can get those stories from other people, it's amazing.
Yeah, I say I call it, I have a couple relatives on different sides of the family. I call it the black and white and the color. So like stuff you find on like Ancestry or pieces of paper, that's black and white.
Yep.
Now, with a lot of relatives who are now gone, I can't get the color.
Yeah.
Sort of about that uncle.
Yeah.
all of those sorts. But some black and white information is still good. So like you find death certificates and you find out that successive relatives died due to, they may have called it something different. They called it a generic name, but that had something to do with maybe high blood pressure.
Right.
Like, maybe I need to pay attention to this because those are the kind of things a lot of times in families that people don't talk about.
Yeah.
Oh, he just bled to death.
Okay.
From what?
Right.
You bled.
I mean, cool. It's so amazing for your kids to be able to have that. Are they interested in it yet?
Somewhat.
Okay.
My older son, because what the kids have, they have little tidbits that are like you, or tidbits that are like your husband or wife, and like the grandparents or whatever. My older son, he pays attention to some of it, but it makes, and sort of like from writing this, I reflect, like you were saying, you kind of wish that when you were younger, you paid closer attention to certain things, because I think, and part of what I'm writing in this book, with the legacy about some of those relatives who I thank for things that they left to me. When I was younger, I wish I'd paid closer attention to some of the things that they were saying. Some things stuck with me. Great aunt, she was heavily into sports. So I didn't start paying attention to sports because I paid attention to sports because of her. She was mostly into baseball. I'm not as much into baseball, but baseball's probably number 3, but I'm still kind of into it. But things like that.
That's really cool. And especially that your aunt gave you that. So that's also really interesting.
Yeah, she loved baseball.
My dad's aunt also loved baseball and got him into it. And that's how I got my middle name, was from her. So that's and that's actually how he learned to love math, because he was like, oh, this stuff is useful, like to learn batting averages and things like that. So the whole different world opened up for him in learning about baseball. So that was kind of cool too.
I try to get them to like pay attention to sort of like, stuff going on right now, because when, again, me reflecting on myself, I know that when I was a teenager, from writing this, I was centrally focused on myself and my friends. And as most teenagers, it's not like it's a bad thing.
No,
it's where you are because you're trying to find yourself when you're a teenager. And reflecting back, I wish I'd opened the blinders a little bit more and paid attention to what was going on with some of those relatives. So I talked to them about that, because one of their grandmother, she's 92.
Oh my goodness. Well, I'm going to pivot here a little bit, because you talked about meteorology, you talked about the value of family, you talked about, pursuing your passion. So we're coming up on the weird Pennsylvania weather where it could go either way. Obviously, it could either be like today, where it was like a little bit breezy, sun was out, gorgeous day, or it can be sweltering hot, which I think it's going to be this weekend. If you had to describe your perfect day, and I don't mean meteorologically, that probably was not the right word, but I'm going with it.
It is now.
I will brand it. I'm really close. I know it is. What would that look like for you?
I would just
you would sleep.
The perfect day. No, but when my family and I will get a chance to get away, I typically want to go someplace with a beach.
Okay.
Perfect day for me is someplace with, and I don't mean like the Jersey Shore type of beach. I mean like, Hawaii, Tahiti, the Caribbean, someplace like that when you wake up. Because whenever we would go away, I'm always the first one up because I want to watch the sun come up. I like watching the sun come up and just I've taken videos of just listening to that because that calms me. And then after the sun is up, and if it's like we're at some resort where there's not that many people, that's what I want. Instead of like what's it, Ocean City, Maryland, because once the sun comes up, it's like everybody's every place. I like to fly it. I sort of like that. That would be my set of perfect day of just starting off, and the end of the day would be the same thing. Watching the sun go down. I enjoy that.
It sounds lovely.
Same.
And a lot of sleep in between.
There you go. Are you a runner?
No, not that much. Other than treadmill or on a bike.
When your picture coming on, it looked like you were wearing some type of like athletic.
That was
okay.
That was those were during the COVID walks.
Okay.
Got it.
My wife and I were doing those. So when we hit into COVID, my wife and I, we were walking every day. We got up to a point where we were walking 7 miles a day.
Wow,
that's amazing.
Good for you.
Yeah, I was probably about 25 pounds lighter. I was walking so much.
That'll do it. My favorite time to run is in the morning, and I love getting out before the sun comes up and then being able to watch it. So that was why I asked. I just seeing that moment, and even the dark before it is there's something special that happens when the sun comes out.
Watching the transition. Yeah, and when we would go, my youngest son, he's always the one that would go with me.
Oh, neat. Okay.
The older son, he's at the point now where he's like, what do I have to go? Do I really need to go on this vacation with you guys? I'd rather be somewhere with my friends.
Of course.
Of course.
Oh boy.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. That's already starting for us, and we got a 9-year-old. So I feel like we might be in for some trouble with that one.
It's going to happen. It's going to happen when they want to do it.
I don't doubt it. So you've been to the beach before, yes? So you've been to Hawaii or have you been to Tahiti? Oh, okay.
Tahiti.
Oh,
gotcha. So you've traveled. So what is the best trip that you've ever taken, and how has it impacted your life?
The best trip that I've ever taken was with my wife before she was my wife. We went to Antigua.
Oh.
Right on top of South America.
Okay.
And before we met, I was single, and I was just, hey, what's your name? And it was all the same. I was meeting a bunch of people, and I was like, I'm not really interested in this, that, and the other. And then I met her, and she was pretty much calmed me down. She's like, let's gonna go on a trip. I was like, sure. And we went to Antigua, and from that trip I realized she's the one.
Oh wow.
And not long after that, I went and got the ring. And what year was this? 2023. That was about 24 years ago.
Oh.
That would have been the most memorable trip.
Yeah.
And that was why, because there was no pressure. I forget, there was a quote Denzel Washington had. I can't even think of it. I'll tell you guys later, because I can't remember what it was. I didn't have the stress and the pressure of, are you the one? Conversation all of the time, or where's this leading to? It was pretty.
Yeah.
I'm enjoying being with you with me. We have a whole lot in common. You know what? Let's get married. Sure, let's do it. You know, that kind of thing.
Taking it slow. Well, I've never met your wife, but I've only ever heard amazing things, and I need to meet her someday. So maybe you could bring her in at some point.
Yeah, I think part of it is our personalities are sort of, we're both funny in our own ways, but I think that with the whole opposites attract, I think that's what helps.
It's a balance.
It is a fine balance, because I am particular, probably with a lot of different things. And prior to her, I was meeting people that were a lot more particular and extreme than me. So I was just like, oh my God, am I really there? And she's very, very laid back. So it was perfect.
It helps. It can be challenging also, because it challenges you in the way you think and do things.
Yeah, because you're like, because one, it made me, it slowed me down a little bit, because I was, like, I'm too extreme about certain things. And also, I think getting close to late 20s, early 30s, somewhere around there, I was like, okay, I actually had a mental conversation with myself. And I was like, if I wait, I know I'm particular. If I wait too long, I'm going to be extremely particular, and no one's going to be able to come into my space. So I was like, I need to just like chill out. And she was just the perfect person to make me chill out.
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah. Antigua, and it was very hot. That's probably the hottest place I've ever been. I know that there are other places on the planet that are hotter because Antigua is close to the equator also.
Sure, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I remember walking on the beach and literally I could feel my skin popping like bacon. I was just like, okay, we have to go back. We walked out on the beach and I was like, it's like, no.
Oh, dear.
No.
No.
Wow.
It was very hot.
Yeah. Pro tip, make sure you wear shoes.
Some sort of shoes.
The sand because I'd taken the shoes off and I was like,
nope.
I put it on my feet and I was like, it's too hot. It was like walking on hot coals. I was like, no, too much.
Oh boy. But I'm assuming, so does it have the like beautiful water out there?
Yeah. Yes. But you just have to wait until either you come out there before the sun comes up, like you were talking about. The sun is just peaking up because as soon as it peaks up,
people are out.
120.
Get out.
Yeah, but it was beautiful. I think if I remember right, that was the most fun we had. I still have the pictures on the Jolly Roger, because there was this one guy. He was toast. He made the boat ride that much better.
Oh my goodness.
Bad. Oh, I mean, that is memorable.
Yeah, that was we had a lot of fun there.
Have you been back since?
No, never haven't been back. Have not been back to Antigua. So we've been in Antigua, we've been to Paris. Yeah. And that was
love Paris.
One trip we went to we just went to Florida because my in-laws, they had a house in Florida, and we went on one of those, what do you call them, timeshares.
Yeah.
That was funny because the guy, this was before we had kids, and he and we just went to get the free stuff.
Yep.
Like,
sure. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
We went to get the free stuff, and he saw that at the end, and he was like, he was mad. He said, you never, what was it? It was almost like, oh my God, I can't remember, because my wife and I, she remembers every word verbatim, but it made us laugh. And he said, you should get this timeshare because life is moving fast. You're going to have kids, and when you have kids, you're not going to be able to do anything or go anyplace. Bye. And he walked out, and we were like, whoa.
Wow.
Yeah. What's it, Seinfeld? No soup for you.
No,
for us,
I was going to say,
for you.
That is one way to close a deal. Maybe not the right way, but oh goodness.
Change your mind. We want to get this from you. No, we're good.
Oh wow. Yeah. He's got some work to do, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Where is your dream trip?
I would probably, it wouldn't be one location. I'd probably pop to quite a few different places. I would like to visit the Ivory Coast. I would like quite a few places in Africa, South Africa, Egypt, Nigeria. I'd like to go back to Paris again. And there's this island right off, because a friend of mine, we went to high school together. And it was triplets that were in the Olympics. They were from this island right off of the coast of Africa. And I can't think of the name. It'll come to me afterwards.
That's okay.
But I'd probably like to travel quite a few places around Africa and in the U.S. There's a lot of places that I like, but like Chicago, I love Chicago, but the wintertime you can keep Chicago.
Oh, no.
Yep, agreed. Yep. Chicago is a fun city, though. 100% great place to visit. But I agree with you. I would not want to be anywhere near it during the winters.
I'd like to go back to Tahiti, to Bora Bora specifically, because we flew into Tahiti, Moorea, and then stopped, and we were in Bora Bora for a while. I'd like to someplace like Bora Bora.
I would love to do that also at some point. That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
I see the pictures. I feel like they throw that. Well, now that I'm saying it too, I'll get Instagram or Facebook posts of one of those or both of those and be like, you should come here. Because everything's listening to you.
We're talking around the phone, so we'll get commercials all of a sudden.
It's really weird. It's weird. Stop listening to me. Yes.
So it's also funny. So I've been testing out the Chat GPT, some of that stuff. And you remember May, right? So she's like, you need to make sure you're polite to the robots. So anytime I talk to the chats and I'm like, thank you very much. How was your day? So just a pro tip, make sure you're kind to the robots as you're talking to them.
And I try to make sure I don't say any passwords around the robots.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah.
But yeah, so I know, gosh, I can't believe we've almost come up to an hour. So one of the questions that we ask everybody is what is on your this is happening list? And this is happening isn't necessarily like, bucket list stuff. It can be, but it's more aligned with what you talk about in terms of passion and, really finding a place in this life that doing something for you almost feels like part of your heart that has to be done. What is on sort of this is happening path for you going forward?
What is happening? Well, getting that book completed.
Yeah. So what date?
I have to make that happen. I actually talked to a college classmate of mine. He actually has 2 books completed, and got me in contact with a couple people that'll help accelerate the process.
Good.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That we'll see. I have to get myself sparked up to get going.
That's fair.
That after that, it's the kids getting my oldest, getting him with this the cat test. He has a book, so he's been practicing doing that.
Okay.
Junior prom, nephew, senior prom.
Oh boy.
Talking them through that kind of stuff.
Oh my goodness. Do you ever think COVID would be part of your parenting journey? Because I didn't.
No, that's one of the things I always have to take into consideration, because that pretty much throws things completely into a different, like particularly like with my nephew with his schools, they were remote for a very long time. And that kind of, I think that shifts you as a person, because you don't have standard the normal normal relationships, and it becomes more difficult to connect with people. So now with like my oldest, is every time he can, he's like, I'm out of here. Can I go? Can I go? I want to love you guys, but bye-bye.
Right. Ready for it.
So that's my primary drive right now. The next is sort of getting that book done.
Yeah.
I can't wait. I'm so excited.
Same.
And I just can't hide it.
I'm about to lose control.
Exactly.
I think I like it.
I guess that's just where I'm at. It only takes a little phrase, and there's a song, there's a commercial, there's some jingle.
I used to get, do your kids, so I used to get so upset when my parents would do that. Like, why everything I say becomes something. And I definitely do it now also. So like at some point you've heard enough songs and movie quotes and TV jingles that they just like, oh, that reminds me of this thing.
Yeah, as my grandmother used to say, you live long enough, you'll see.
Yeah, exactly.
Live long enough, you'll see, because I do it all of the time. There's, at the end of a lot of times meetings at work, it's the Carol Burnett jingle or whatever, and she'd say, when she grabbed her tongue on her ear, I forget the name of the song, but I would do that at the end of meetings all of the time. People
love it.
Oh my God. Every time we leave, it's just the way.
Embrace it.
Good night, John Boy. Stop it. As much as I hated that show, I hated it because, well, back then that was one of the only things on TV. My sister loved it. And when we go over to my grandmother's house, one TV, she turned that on. When you guys watch this, go to bed. I'm like, can we watch something else? Your sister wants to watch it. I'm like, oh. Good night, John Boy. Good night, so and so. I'm like,
Good night already. Yeah.
Can I also just say real quick, the audience couldn't see what you just did, but while you were explaining about turning on the TV, you made the hand gesture of turning.
Turning them out.
So any very young people will not know what that means at all in any way, shape, or form.
Turning that, that, or you've seen like some of those videos of people using telephones where
yes,
yeah,
yep,
you know.
Yep.
Well, that's how you can also tell you if you ask a child, like a very young child, how would you, like if I'm saying, try to tell me that you're on the phone with just hand gestures, they do this versus this. Right. Sorry. All right. For those just listening, the one was the flat hand against your face, and then the other was the hang loose sign, right?
Yeah, the hang loose
or whatever.
Yep. So that's how you know you're old.
Aloha. Yes. Aloha. Yeah.
Oh, but it's funny. Goodness. It all changes.
It really does. It does.
It does. I have down here. I have my mother's 8 tracks down here.
Oh my
heavens!
8-track player.
That's fantastic. My grandma used to have those. Instead of movies, we had the gigantic, like, I don't even remember what
the reels.
No, they were. It was like an LP, like a record.
Oh, like a laser disc.
Yes, yeah. We
the
had
laser
disc, and I was like, "What is this thing?" It was huge. But yeah, I did enjoy seeing that. I don't know what, it just felt special going to grandma's house and using those.
Yeah.
Using the old school stuff.
Yeah, I remember my grandfather bought that when it was like brand new. He would buy like all the brand new stuff, like any new technology he was in. So like going to his house, he had the laser disc, and then he had like the Betamax, and then he had the VCR. Yeah, I think that's what we got to. So yeah, he had all of the new things, and we were like, yes. So it was fun
running
stuff.
joke with my wife and I when we first, not long after we got married, back when they used to have stores that you go into to rent tapes and rent videos and things. Everyone else, when not long after we got married, everyone else was going over to the side with the DVDs. We still had VHS, and it was like we felt like, I'm like, how old are we? Because we felt really old because everyone else was doing DVD, but.
Right.
The good thing about it is we had all of the VHS to ourselves.
Totally.
Exactly.
We had all of that to ourselves. Hollywood Video.
You were Hollywood Video. We had the Blockbuster.
With Hollywood Video, Blockbuster. I think about it when I was living in New York, there was a Blockbuster up there before I met my wife. And I would go there like sometimes when I didn't go out on some weekend, I would go there, grab a couple videos, rent them, and come back and put the VHS.
Yeah. Well, in my hometown, we were fancy. We had a pizza shop that was connected to a video store.
Ooh.
So they had it all figured out. Like you'd go and get, and that pizza it's exactly. You go, I would walk up the street, go visit my friend who was working the video store, but then walk like inside the corridor and into the pizza shop, like grab my pizza, like have her grab me 2 movies, and I would walk back home. Yeah, it was kind of cool.
That's how you do business.
Yeah
they had that figured out. It was great. It was great. Yeah
We have neighbors, so my son's good friend, and then I became friends with their parents. They call it Pamina. So pizza movie night. So Pamina. It's all the smashed into one.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
Somebody get them a wiki page. That's awesome. Yeah.
So we say that now.
Awesome.
But thanks to them. Yeah.
Awesome. So James, it's always a pleasure talking to you. Eileen, thank you so much. And everyone, dear listeners, thank you so much for joining the 3 of us in this episode of You Only Go Once, otherwise known as YOGO. Take care. See you later.
Live long and prosper.
Yeah.